And we do have a question from our audience. Yes, sir.
I'm Alec Martin from Greenville County, and I guess the most pressing question at this point would be, as we move towards 2010, we also find ourselves in the midst of tough economic times. I'd love to get each of the panel members to give their opinions, their look, their take on what they think needs to be done short-term and long-term from a financial perspective.
Well, let me just go ahead and start from a business perspective. And I think the real issue is we've just gone into what most people don't want to recognize as a recession, but we're definitely in recession. And when you start looking at that, the first question is, how long are we going to be in it and how deep is it going to be? From talking to most of the people in the business community, as excited as we want to be about trying to encourage people to continue to spend and all, it looks like this is going to be a fairly long and fairly deep cycle, for at least from the business community. And when you start looking at how and the business community plays in this whole thing, really it's us that creates the job, it's us that creates the wealth, it's us that creates the revenue sources for which the state bases its budgets, and ultimately how we finance public schools and all the different types of services we have in this state. I think the real issue that concerns the business community is the strains that's being put on the state budget right now and how ultimately that may come back onto the business community. Act 388 was a piece of public policy that's right now the way we funding schools with one of the most unstable sources of revenue, which is sales taxes, that really is a pretty, as an indicator goes, recession affects that revenue source more than anything else, and we realize that effect it's going to have on public schools. So I think from a business community standpoint, we really got to be careful on what happens over the next 2 years, because there's going to be a tendency on behalf of the education system to look to businesses to pay the largest portion of, or make up those portions that the general fund and the General Assembly doesn't send back to the school districts as a result of the lost revenues. I would just encourage local school administrators and all that you don't kill the goose to lay the golden egg. We're pressing just like everybody else is, and if we can turn this corner, then I think the education system, our state, will turn this corner. But be careful. Let's get through this thing together, and I think that we can.
As far as where we are and how we are assessing where we are toward that goal, is it a true positive, or are we concerned about the negatives that are inherent in where we are?
Well, yeah, just to follow up on a little bit of what Dr. Anderson said, the study that I had, just happen to have with me, says that we're doing, once you normalize the data and things of that sort, we're doing a pretty good job. I mean, yeah, are we where we need to be? No. Are we moving on the right track? The answer is yes. I think a couple things that we tend to get locked in most every debate is around poverty. And there are 11 states that have higher poverty levels than we have, yet have lower graduation rates than we have. I mean, there's a scenario of probably 7 or 8 different things that contribute to whether or not a child can perform. And, you know, I think from a business perspective, we've got to help the education community focus in on those types of things. We've got to provide our expertise into the communities to get done what we needed to be. I think the real issue where we kind of lose context, we do a pretty good job up to the 8th grade. And if you look at all the NAEP scores, you look at everything, you look at it, then when you look at our exit scores, we fall off dramatically. And I think where the business community really has a chance to help the education community, and go back to what Tom has said a little bit, is under the Education Economic Development Act. And that's a comprehensive act that has become a model act where everybody across the country is looking at how we're dealing with kids beginning in the 8th grade and how we follow them through the 12th grade, looking at developing individual graduation plans for them where we know what they're going to do, what they're going to try to accomplish. We're developing education clusters for majors where these kids can see the relevancy for what they're taking in class and how that applies to what they're going to do after they get out. We looked at dropping the guidance counselor to student ratio from 700 to 1 to 300 to 1, where we can identify these kids as they begin to slip. we pick them up and we hold them up and do the things that we've got to do to make sure that they're successful. I think the other part of this is that those people that have dropped out, what are we going to do about them? Well, we need to pick them up pretty quickly. We know that most kids that have dropped out of high school are not going back into a high school setting. So we got to go back and reevaluate our whole delivery system for those folks that have dropped out. And part of that is reevaluating our adult education program, whether it's at the Department of Education, whether it's at technical colleges, whether it's at higher ed. All these things begin to kind of piece together. I think there's success up to the 8th grade. We got to continue that success from the 8th grade to the time they graduate and keep our eye on the ball. So let's keep the dropout rate as low as we are. And if they do, go back and refocus and try to get them with a GED or something that they can put to work in getting a job and moving their families and their children and make it just a better quality of life for all these folks.
The information that has been shared today and the discussion have assured me that there is much we can do as individuals and as communities to assist schools and students in succeeding. We all have a role and can make an impact. I urge you to continue to use your influence and energies to create relentless pressure for continuous improvement in South Carolina schools. For additional information about this report or the work of the South Carolina Education Oversight Committee, contact information is on your screen. Thank you again for being with us. That number again is on your screen, and we hope that you will get more information about the program today. Again, thank all of you for being with us, and thank all of you in the audience.